Request to postpone.
You should have received a letter from the attorney, Paul Marone, on that one, and he had requested that it be postponed. So I will entertain a motion to...
Mr. Chairman, I move that be postponed.
Second.
All right, this is zoning case 8307-076A. It's a major amendment to a plan unit development overlay. The size is 324.5 acres. The petitioner is Paul Marone. The owner's the estate of Frederick J. Segura, parcel located on the south side of Louisiana 433, west of U.S. Highway 90, Ward 9, District 13. We have a motion and a second to postpone till next month. Please vote. All right, motion carries to postpone item 8. Now, I don't know how many of you are in the audience. This is the Treasure Isle case. So if you're here for that, it's been postponed until next month. Okay? Wrigley's estate, I'm sorry, yes.
Could you give us a date now?
Pardon me?
A date?
First Tuesday of the month. What is it?
April 1st.
April.
This one?
Yeah, the motion carried to postpone 8-0. Thank you. All right. Let's see. All right. Postponing public hearing appears. All right. First item is zoning case 1403020. Existing zoning is A2 Suburban District. The proposed zoning is Highway Commercial District. HC2, it's .091 acres. I'm sorry, it's 0.91 acres. A little bit of difference there. Petitioner is Maria Vincent Landry. The owner is James P. Vincent, Therese Cambra Rochelle, Harold Cambra Trust, number 1, Kathleen V. Harrison, Maria Vincent Landry, Joseph D. Vincent Jr., parcel located on the south side of U.S. Highway 190, east of Lake Road, west of Bayou Lacombe, being 28214 Highway 190, Lacombe, Ward 7, District 7. Staff?
The 2025 Future Land Use Plan calls for the area to be developed with residential uses. There is an existing commercial building on the site which has been in operation since 2001. Note that the parcel was zoned C1 Neighborhood Commercial prior to the comprehensive rezoning plan of 2009. Staff does not object to the requested zoning, considering the location of the site along a major collector and in close proximity to other existing commercial uses. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Mr. Shane?
Good evening, Mr. Daugherty and Zoning Commission. My name's Jeff Shane. I'm with the Jones Fussell Law Firm in Covington, and I represent the Vincent family, which are the owners of the property in question. In many respects, I think this case is similar to others that you have heard in the last few years since comprehensive rezoning, and that is that in essence, I think it's a case of a commercial property that lost its commercial zoning in the 2009 comprehensive zoning process. Certainly, my clients understand that they did not express themselves during that hearing process to maintain the commercial zoning that this property had. That doesn't mean that that's the only reason that maybe you should consider recommending to the council that the zoning be changed. I'd like to give you some facts about the property that hopefully would help you in your deliberation. First and foremost, this property was actually zoned commercially in 1987, which was a prior comprehensive zoning process that the parish went through. And interestingly, it has a commercial history since the time of 1987 at that particular location. In fact, it was zoned C1 and of course enjoyed that zoning from 1987 to 2009. The property has had a variety of uses through the years. It's got a modular building which I am guessing is about 1,500 or so square feet. I may be a little mistaken, but it's not too far from that. And for those of you that frequent the Lacombe area on occasion, if you're traveling west on 190, this would be the first property to the left or on the lake side. It's got a little driveway, and you can see the little building tucked to the side. Abutting it is the beautiful cemetery. It's been there for time immemorial. And I think some things that I would like you to take into consideration is that this property, in our view, is in a commercial corridor in the Lacombe area. If you will look, please, at your staff report, and in particular, the vicinity map that you've been provided, please note actually a much more intense zoning across the street, HC3, and also in this area as well. I think another important factor, in addition to the history of commercial use, and probably most of that commercial use has been since 1999 as the Vincent Guard Service, although it was a series of offices before 1999. But I think if you look at the configuration of the property, as shown on both the survey and the vicinity map, if any of you that have visited the property, you might note that there's an extreme drop in elevation. So don't picture 9/10 of an acre that is all at the minimum flood zone area. There's only really a small portion of the property in the front that's kind of on a ridge, and that's where the building is situated. My guess is there's probably enough room for 6 to 8 parking spaces at that location. I rode there again yesterday to kind of refresh my memory. So I know that there are some here this evening that may disagree with this zoning change, and I believe it's because they fear that there could be something there of a scale that might not be appropriate, meaning a size, an impact. So I think that the thrust of my argument to you would be it's got a long history of commercial, number one. I'm sorry, I thought you were motioning to me. A long history of commercial, number one. Number two, it is in a commercial corridor, well-defined. Number three, its size and elevation really limits the type of use that you could have there. I would suggest to you that to allow this property to remain A2, single-family residential, is simply not practical. To think that someone would build a single-family residential structure on this property directly fronting the highway in a commercial corridor, it just, to me, does not make sense as it relates to the most likely land use. So I think these are all good reasons that we would ask that you recommend to the council that the property be zoned HC2. If any of you have questions or comments for me after you've heard from everyone, I'll be glad to address them at that time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. All right, those of you in the audience that would like to speak, when you come forward, I need you to state your name and address. And does anyone wish to speak for this? Anyone in the audience wish to speak against? You wish to speak for? Against, okay. If you wish to speak against, come forward and state your name and address, please. And if you haven't filled out a speaker card, please do so.
My name is Dr. Eileen Pallas. My address is 28041 Main Street in Lacombe, Louisiana, 70445. I am the adjacent property owner on all sides of the property that we're discussing. If I may, I would like to hand out the survey of my property to the members of the board. This is a survey of my property, as well as the property that we're discussing, the rezoning and the surrounding area. Let me walk it through you very quickly, if I may. If you start on Block 99 on Parcel B, that is where our home is located along Main Street. We also own Parcel C, which you can see diagonally right behind it. That includes approximately 878 square feet of all of the waterway from the beginning of that Parcel 99 all the way up into adjoining the bridge. We also own Block 99, which is that front square in front that is surrounding the rectory and, of course, Sacred Heart directly across the street. And we own the half of that St. Joseph Street right beside the cemetery that they mentioned. The remaining area there that you can see with the little mobile home on it is the Vincent property. We feel that this request surpasses the need for commercial property in this small residential and historic area of Lacombe. We also feel that it's inappropriate as commercial property for a number of reasons. First of all, if you look at Parcel C on our property, you can see that that's a very large and primarily an area of protected wetlands. These wetlands go the length of all of Bayou Lacombe, and they do go almost half across the Vincent property. And it's correct that this land slants down. Most of that, though, is marsh and wetlands, and it's on a diagonal, which means that it's unbuildable. Also, we have some concern about the safety issue of crossing from that small bridge that goes across Bayou Lacombe and directly into an area that's a small residential suburb. We also believe that this is one of the few remaining very beautiful historic residential areas of Lacombe. If you look again at this area, you're going down Bayou Lacombe that has small private boats parked along it. We have Block 100 has 7 named historic and numbered oak trees. We have Sacred Heart Church. We have the small cemetery, and we have all residential property along that area, which adjoins to and is connected to this area belongs to Vincent's. We feel that it is unnecessary at this time to have there is no commercial property there now, and it's unnecessary to add commercial property into this region. We think that it would damage the value of this beautiful area that we have in Lacombe, and perhaps decrease the popularity of it as a visiting area and for nearby residents. And we would respectfully request the decline of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm John Gagnotti, and I filled out a card. As you look at that handout that you have there before you, our house is 28071 Main Street. It's on the far right. You'll see a house, a swimming pool, a garage, etc. And I'm here to add just a bit to what Dr. Pallas had to say. Our concern is the proximity of this property to the bridge approach. While the property may only allow 6 to 8 parking spaces, the amount of traffic entering or exiting that particular property will present a problem to the traffic as it is approaching the bridge there at Bayou Lacombe. And it's just a fact of life. 434 intersects 190. There's a stop sign there. People are making turns left. People are coming out 434, turning right to approach the bridge. And that particular drive will present a traffic hazard to people as they approach the Bayou Lacombe Bridge. Also want to mention one other thing. Bayou Lacombe in that area is a scenic waterway. This is the only property on that side of the bridge that is that close to the scenic waterway. And we would very much like to protect the scenic view of the waterway in that area, in that we would not want to see a large commercial structure built upon that site. There's just one other point I want to mention, and that is the cemetery. You do not have topographic lines on that particular chart, but if you walk the ground and look at the cemetery, you will see that the cemetery is posted on a mound, very much like a burial mound or a ridge. Half of that mound is in this particular property and could not be utilized unless it were leveled. And that would pose a threat to the cemetery itself. The people that enjoy using that cemetery prefer the peace and quiet. Again, if you put a commercial structure there with traffic in and out, you just lose that whole ambience there. And that's primarily why we're opposed to designating this as an HC1 zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? We still have a few minutes. All right. Mr. Shane, I'll go back to you for rebuttal.
Thank you, sir. With regard to the comments by Dr. Pallas and Mr. Gennady, I guess beauty's always in the eyes of the beholder, but I certainly respect their comments, but I think there's some things that maybe, again, I should emphasize to you. I don't believe that Mrs. Pallas purchased her property until 1999, at which time this property had been zoned commercially already for 12 years and in fact had an existing business in place. From approximately 1998 until 6 months ago, Vincent Guard Service successfully operated its business at that location, having as many as 80 employees in the business. I am not suggesting that all 80 employees were at the business at any one time, but I would suggest to you that the nature of the business being a guard service, there were not only supervisors on site, but employees that came to and from the premises literally 24 hours a day. My point is that this property did in fact operate successfully as a commercial property without incident as it relates to the driveway connection to 190. Yes, it's near the bridge in the sense that it's the first property, but for those of you that know its location in relation to the bridge, in my view, it's not on top of the bridge, or maybe better said, the bridge is not on top of it. We understand that if the property is zoned commercially, it's going to have to be developed or operated in a manner that meets whether it's traffic requirements of the state, DOTD, whether it's your local traffic requirements through your parish traffic engineer, or any other planning regulation as it relates to impacts. So I think that the property demonstrates that it has in fact been a successful commercial location. You know what the reality of this whole case really is? What in the world do you do with 9/10 of an acre that has a commercial building on it and has been commercial since 1987, and you're now told it's single-family residential? How do you sell it? How do you sell a commercial parcel for a single-family residential site that abuts the highway? I think, if anything, the cemetery serves as a buffer of sorts, and I think it has served as a buffer between this parcel and the other parcels that have been pointed out to you on the exhibit. And again, beauty being in the eyes of the beholder, as I rode the neighborhood again yesterday, just to kind of get a feel again for where everyone's located, I really don't think this property and its use will have any direct and probably no indirect impact on these other properties. Again, that's just my view, but I'm only telling you that if you go down Main Street and you take your time and you take a look at where the houses are, you have to strain to see the roof of the building. You certainly can see it, but I just cannot imagine that this site is large enough and is going to have any type of use that is going to be disruptive. Perhaps that is why the staff report is very clear, in my view. It indicates that although the area might have anticipated residential use and development, it also recognizes that this property had a long history of commercial zoning, commercial usage, and staff did not see any reason why this piece would not fit into the puzzle, just as the other properties in that section of 190 have as well. I think we all believe that the commercial needs to be on the state highways. It doesn't need to be in other locations. Likewise, I don't think we want to see single-family residential necessarily abutting our state highways, where we know that we can create commerce, job opportunities, tax base, et cetera. This is not a property that's by size or by its physical characteristics, it can be overdeveloped. I don't think it's going to create unfair impacts to the neighbors, and I ask that you allow my clients to have their investment restored to the commercial property that they purchased and that they successfully operated for nearly 15 years.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. All right. Any other rebuttal? Those of you against, do you have any rebuttal to what Mr. Shane just said?
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to add that we don't have any concern with the way the Vincent property has been run since I purchased my property in 1999. If it were to stand as it currently stands, that would be wonderful. Actually, that would be my first choice, is to leave it the way it is and everyone's quite comfortable. Unfortunately, you're not putting it back to that. You're putting it to a higher zone that's going to give much more leeway for more commercialism, larger structures. It pretty well gives it a free-for-all from gas stations to dog kennels. Anything can be built under the proposed zoning. So it's not fair to compare it to where it is. Where it is great. We put it back and keep it where it is. I'm okay with that. Giving more permission to do more than they're doing is something quite else. And as you pointed out, there's really no space. There's possibility maybe of a parking lot or two, but I believe it even violates the ability or the new possible laws for the rights of the size of driveways and parking lots per area square space for the building. The rest, again, is protected land and waterways and slants down to the bayou. There is no possibility of any water access, given that our property's in the way. I know there was some misunderstanding earlier that there might be ability to make a restaurant or something. That's simply not a possibility. So I think they need to reconsider what can be done, and if we can keep it the way that it is now, which would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other person wish to speak against a rebuttal? I'm going to close the floor to the public, bring it back to the commission. Mr. Davis.
Yeah, Mr. Shane.
Yes, sir.
I pass by this site every day. I live on Lake Road. I pass by it. Now, I do have to agree that I don't believe the A2 zoning is correct for this. I believe residential right here it doesn't even make sense to this. Now, as far as highway commercial 2, I believe that highway commercial is probably the right thing to do, but highway commercial 2's got a 40,000 square foot building on it, and highway commercial 1 has a 20,000. And you had previously had C1 before, which I know because I talked this over with the councilman. So I would prefer you go from A2 to highway commercial 1. Now, if you still insist on highway commercial 2, I'd have to make a recommendation to deny. But if you go to highway commercial 1, I think that would be appropriate.
Mr. Matthews?
Um,
And Pug?
Jeff, I also think that this property needs to be commercial. It was commercial, I think, on the highway situation of the size of the property where it is. This was an era to have this as residential. However, like Jimmy, somewhat, I think Highway Commercial 2 is a serious step up from C1, or it's on the top edge of C1. This would allow restaurants with lounges, a printing shop, car wash, food processors, drive-in restaurants, liquor store, lodging with 100 rooms, auto repair, outdoor storage, all of these types of things, if you could fit it into this small piece of property, would be allowed. I don't know what you have in mind, and that's not really germane, what the new owner or the owner would have in mind, but all of these things are open to it. Clearly, I think HC2 is too high. I personally think one of the NCs would be more appropriate. It currently, not currently, just in the recent past, had an NC type business on it, neighborhood commercial type business, and I think we ought to allow that type of business to continue to operate on this piece of property. I would be in favor of an NC, and I'm not sure which NC, but I would be favoring at least an NC 2 or 3 or something like that. But not highway commercial. I think that's too intense for the cemetery, that's too intense for the wetlands that are right there, and I'm not really sure what type of NC or HC you'd want to put on a piece of property like this.
Mr. Lloyd?
Couple of questions. Well, look, Jeff, do you have any response, Jeff?
Yes, sir, I did, but
Go
because I
ahead.
thought, I'd rather not comment yet with regard to whether or not we would consider a down zone, but I would like to say that, as you well know, your zoning regulations also have safeguards built within them as it relates to lot coverage, meaning how much of the 9/10 of an acre can be built on. It has parking requirements, meaning that as a function of what you build, how many spaces you must provide. It has buffer and setback requirements, particularly where they abut residential property, where you must take the more conservative residential setbacks and buffer requirements. So I acknowledge that this is a somewhat unusual case, but I would tell you that there is a reason that we'd like HC2. By way of example, if there were a finance company or a bank that wanted to have a very small outlet at that location, some type of financing facility, that HC2 zoning becomes very important. And again, for those of you that have visited the property, you would know that not only its area, but its elevation and the restrictions that I just mentioned in the code, that is going to impose or restrict the type of development that you're going to have there. So I think that's the reason staff agreed. I mean, you've got HC3 across the street. And I don't think that there's anything that can happen on this property that would be negative to the cemetery. And again, that's with all due respect to a gorgeous cemetery. Again, I'm mindful and respectful of what's there, and I'm likewise mindful and respectful of the residents that live on Main Street. I don't know them personally, know Mr. Gennady, I didn't know he lived there, but my point is I'm respectful of their thoughts. I don't think, though, that the HC2 would create that type of problem.
Bug?
Just a couple of questions, and Jeff, you might could clarify it. I know you've said on the opposite side of 190, you've got the more intense zoning. On the side that we're talking about, are there any other commercial on that side?
Yes, sir. Going to the west.
No, I'm talking about like on this thing we've got here.
Well, that's the exhibit that I think Dr. Pallas gave you.
Yeah.
I think that if you would look at the second page of your staff report, the vicinity map that shows you the zone, it would show you, again, if you'll follow the highway, you'll see that the commercial zoning picks up
I'm talking about this side,
at Lake Road.
way down here.
Now, the property immediately contiguous, I acknowledge, is zoned A2.
Okay.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
All right, the other question I have is, we've known that comprehensive rezoning took place several years ago. Has it been operated as a commercial establishment during this gap?
Yes, sir. It has been continuously operated commercially since 1987. If there was an exception, I'm not aware of it, until Vincent Guard Service relocated approximately 6 months ago to a location further to the west on US Highway 190. But to answer your question, it has continuously been operated. It was a series of offices before my clients purchased the property in 1998, but they have successfully run and conducted the Vincent Guard Service business there for approximately 15 years.
Okay, thank you.
Ron, you have a comment?
Yes, Mr. Shane, I thought Pub was going to go a little further, but just across Bayou Lacombe, in the same area, is there any commercial just east of Bayou Lacombe, in Lacombe,
I'll let, on the, to the east or north,
northeast, yeah.
I'm gonna let the residents correct me if I'm wrong, but to my recollection, as you cross the bridge going sort of north and east towards Slidell, I don't think there's anything immediately to the south or right. If I remember correctly, there's only the building for the bridge, the bridge tender building, or whatever you want to call it. Now, a little further up at the traffic circle is the old site for what I'll call the Sal and Judy's Distribution Center, which has been dormant for 5 years, maybe 3 to 5 years. I believe that would be probably the first commercial property going in that direction, unless one of the locals or Mr. Davis.
The doctor suggested the triangular area of her aerial.
Yes, sir.
This triangular area, is that all wetland?
I would assume that it is, certainly from looking at the elevation and the contour and the type of land it is. I would think that it is a beautiful, natural green space and probably wetland and probably not susceptible to development. And quite frankly, another reason I don't think that this property being commercial is necessarily going to impose an impact on anyone, because I think it would be, if not impossible, very difficult to develop that tract if someone wanted to, just from a permitting standpoint. Even if they could figure out the economics, I think the permitting and the elevations there would probably make it almost impossible to develop parcel C.
One other question, with the acreage we're talking about and the limitations and the restrictions we have with the different zonings, be it NC, HC, whatever, how much of this aerial, and this is what I'm looking at, and also our graph that the staff provided, how much development, whether NC, HC, how much development can take place with those zonings,
Within
with the
that,
concentrated property we have?
it would be my opinion that probably the green triangle north of the building, everyone can see that. I don't think it's any different than parcel C. It couldn't be developed if you wanted to. I would also tell you that if you look at the elevation, and again, I'm just going to give you a layman's impression. I didn't walk down there yesterday because it was raining. I bet you it drops off 8 or 10 feet right behind that building. And maybe it's 5 or 6, maybe it's 12 or 14. But to answer your question, I don't think anything to the rear of the building. And actually, if you go to the south side of the building, as someone pointed out earlier, there's a significant ridge that would be very difficult to develop as well. It is my guesstimate from looking at it and knowing a little bit about development. I would tell you, I think a third of that property, 3/10 of an acre, is probably all that could be developed there. Maybe 4/10, but not a half an acre, 3/4 of an acre, and certainly not 9/10 of an acre. And that's why I think it is unique, but I do think it's appropriate to have a commercial island there.
Ms. Casabon?
Yes, looking at the size and the configuration, has been commercial since '87, something has been there. I'm going to concur with staff, because I think staff is aware of the size and what could go there, that would not change. It may improve the new building or whatever, that particular area. It's on Highway 190. I'm going to make a motion to approve.
Second?
We have a motion by Ms. Casabon to approve the HC2 Highway Commercial. 2 seconds. Ron? Okay, Mr. Randolph seconded. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion carries with a 7-1 vote. Pardon? Oh, 7-2, excuse me. All right, all right, next item is item 2, zoning case 14-03-021. Existing zoning is A1 Suburban District and a rural overlay, RO. Proposed zoning is A2 Suburban District. It's 4 acres. The petitioner is Carrie S. and Mary P. Gaspard, and the owner is the same. Parcel located on the west side of Hines Jenkins Road, south of Louisiana 40, north of Thornhill Road, being 82025 Hines Jenkins Road in Bush, Ward 5, District 6. Staff?
Considering that the site is surrounded by A1 suburban zoning on the north, south, and west sides, staff feel that there's no compelling reason to recommend approval and would like to recommend denial of the request.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience wish to speak on this case? Yes, sir. Please come forward, state your name and address.
Good evening, Board. My name's Kerry Gaspard. I live at 82037 Heinz Jenkins. I'm the owner of the property. Before my knowledge of this rezoning change, it happened, I think, in 2006, right after Katrina. It was A2. The properties across the street are A2. The only reason I'm applying for this to be changed is currently my wife and I are separated and we're going through a property settlement. There's 2 homes on the property. It's relatively about 4 acres. We both need a place to live. I'm not planning on building anything or selling any pieces of it. It's been in my family since '79, and I built both homes on it. The zoning changed, like I say, and it was A2 before. My wife works part-time currently. I'm unemployed, and we both need a place to live. I hope that the council can reconsider. The property to the south of mine has been for sale since I've lived there. It's a virgin property and uninhibited. The property to the right, people moved there not long ago after Katrina. Both properties go behind my property. The way my property is made, both properties on the south and north of me meet up behind my property. So it's those people it's zone A1, but it's not like it's 3 persons, it's just 2 persons. One's piece of property that's for sale. I just would like to have a place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this case? I'll close the floor to the public, bring it back to the commission. Mark?
Yes, sir, your property faces the highway or the road that you live on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. These other properties do not? Is that what you're telling us?
No, they both face the property. They both face the road.
They all do?
Yeah.
Okay. Because you was talking about them coming up behind you.
Well, my property's made like a pie. I'm in a curve, and I have 2 property lines that come to the back and shaped like a pie.
Okay, okay.
The property to the south of me goes behind my property, and the property to the north goes behind it also, and that's where the property line is, behind it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Todd?
Mr. Gaspar, I looked at this aerially. You do have 2 homes on it, correct?
Yes.
And those 2 homes have been there for how long?
I built the first home in '81, '82, and the second home in '98.
Okay. And I think, is one of the drives on Thornhill and one of them's on Heinz Jenkins? So you have 2 different drives?
No, they both
Okay.
on Heinz Jenkins.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Davis?
Yeah, Ms. Gaspard. You have 2 homes and you have 2 smaller outside buildings south of one of those homes, correct? Just real small little
I
outbuildings.
have a pump shed and a garage.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a problem with making this A2. I make a recommendation for A2.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Motion by Mr. Davis, second by Ms. Casabon to go to A2. Bernie, do you have a comment? Okay. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 3, zoning case 14-03-022, existing zonings A3 Suburban District. Proposed zoning is A3 Suburban District and Manufactured Housing Overlay. It's 19,765.5 square feet. The petitioner is Ricky Homrick. Owner is the same, parcel located on the south side of Bobby Jones Boulevard, east of Iron Street, being Lot 13, Square 8, Hillcrest Subdivision, Ward 10, District 6. Staff?
The 2025 future land use plan calls for the area to be developed with residential uses, including manufactured homes. Staff has no objection to the request and recommends approval.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience wish to speak on this case? Yes, sir. Come forward and state your name and address. And if you haven't filled out a speaker card, please do so.
My name is Jim Stansberry. I live at 73110 Slice Street in Hillcrest. We've been owning the property on Slice about 13 years, and we built a home on the property about 7.5 years ago. In about a 3-block radius, we have nothing but houses. To my attention, we have approximately 900 acres, and it's 1,800 lots. There's approximately, I think, 125 homes and 110 trailers. Out of the trailers, there's about a third of them vacant. There are trailers constantly coming in, and by talking to the real estate agent, that every time a trailer comes in, our homes are depreciated. I'd like to know exactly what we can do about the problem. I don't want to lose any equity in my home. I spoke with a lot of the individuals in our area on homes, and they said they were going to have modular homes instead of trailers. The way I understand, there's a difference between a modular home and a trailer, and that is the tires are removed, and that's it. So my question is, how many more trailers are coming in? How much more money we're going to lose with our homes? And I think it was 1969, it was set to be a subdivision. Through those years, the way I understand, not one letter was sent to anyone owning the property stating that it was going to be trailers allowed to come in. And beyond that, the land has been depreciating ever since. I'm not against people having a house or a trailer that's already there if they're going to upgrade it. But over the last, let's say, 13 years, I've found more abandoned trailers than I have houses, even on the main drag of Hillcrest Boulevard. We started a homeowners association about almost 5 years ago, and we've been trying to keep it up the best we could. The state has helped us out a lot with blacktop, digging the ditches, and we've seen a lot of improvements, and I appreciate that. But my concern is, with more trailers coming in, we're going to lose more money. So basically, that's my concern and everyone else's. So
Thank you,
whatever
Mr.
you can do, I'd
Stansberry.
appreciate it.
I need to get your address.
73110 Slice Street in Hillcrest.
Okay,
I have approximately 4 acres there.
okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Point of order, Mr. Doherty.
Yes, sir.
Is Mr. Humrick here?
Pardon me?
The petitioner here? Why do we allow the people talk against it before we allow the proponent to talk about it?
Mr. Humrick did not indicate that he was present when I asked if anyone in
Oh.
the audience, so. If you'd like to come speak,
Please come.
please do so. Do we have a speaker card from him?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll do that afterward. Okay, you're welcome to speak.
Good evening, council. I've been living in St. Tammany for a good long time. I got a good reputation that I know people around me from Fontainebleau High School. I'm just trying to start my marriage. I'm planning on putting a remanufactured home. It's brand new. It's not a run-down trailer. It's brand new. I bought it off the Clayton lot this last year. I'm paying it off after I finish this out, and I was just asking for your mercy. And I'm well kept it up. You know, I will take care of what I need to. I'm planning on living here for my whole life. I love this parish. It's been so much a blessing to me. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else in the audience wish to speak either for or against on this case? I'll close the floor to the public and bring it back to the commission. Ms. Casabon.
Yes, this is a particular area that we have allowed manufactured homes. I think at one time it was a was developed as a country club, but it's been many, many, many years, and we have allowed these overlays, so I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Ms. Casabon, seconded by Mr. Hines, to approve the A3 suburban district and a manufactured housing overlay. Any further discussion from the commission? Please vote. Motion carries. Thank you. Page 2, item 4, zoning case 14-03-023. The existing zoning is A1 suburban district. The proposed zoning is A1 suburban district and a manufactured housing overlay. It is 1 acre. Petitioner is Lloyd H. Cazzo. Petitioner is Lloyd H. and Phyllis Cazzo. Parcel located on the north side of Louisiana Highway 40, east of North Willie Road, across from Jim Lloyd Road, being 12161 Highway 40, Folsom, Ward 2, District 3. Staff?
The 2025 future land use plan recommends the area to be developed with residential and agricultural uses. Note that a request consists of a rezoning of 1 acre portion of a 13-acre parcel of land to place in manufactured homes. Staff has no objection and would like to recommend approval of the request.
Thank you. Are the Cazzos present? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Do you have any comments?
We'd just like to let y'all know that we own the property on both sides. We bought 3 individual lots when we moved to St. Tammany over the last 20 years, adjacent to our property, so that each one of our children could have a piece of that ground when we pass on. We have a grandson who's 21 years old and is not in a position to build a home at this time. Hopefully, eventually, he will build one on one of these pieces of property, the 13 acres, and that's what our plan is. Right now, he's young, he can't afford to do that. We have a small 2-bedroom house trailer that we'd like to put on the property. There are trailers in the area, and that's what we'd like to do with it.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this, either for or against? Okay, I'm going to close the floor to the public, bring it back to the commission. Mr. Willie.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. Yes, this request is compatible to that area, and I'll move our approval for that.
We have a motion by Mr. Willie to approve.
I'll second.
We have a second by Mr. Matthews. Any further discussion? Please vote. Thank you. Motion carries. All right. Item 5, zoning case 14-03-024. Existing zoning is A3 Suburban District and HC3 Highway Commercial District. The proposed zoning is PBC1 Planned Business Center and HC3 Highway Commercial District. It's 48.32 acres. The petitioner is Allstate Financial Company and others. The owner is Allstate Financial Company and others. Parcels located on the north side of Pinnacle Parkway, west of the Chupunka River, Ward 1 and 3, District 1. Staff?
Mr. Chairman, you may consider, if it be your pleasure, to combine this case with the next case, adjacent property, same developer.
Okay, Mr. Matthews?
I think these are kind of different. I think I'd prefer to hear them separately.
Okay.
I mean, if the staff, if the commission wants to, but it seems to me it might be better to just hear these separately. I think there's a little difference in each one.
I agree with that.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with it.
I don't have a
I don't
problem
have a
with
problem
hearing them
with
both
it.
together. They'll have to be voted on separately, right?
Separately, and
So as long as
just to
they're
hear
voted
them.
on separately.
I'll make
It's
a
just that
motion to hear
the
them
first case
together.
has to deal with commercialization, the business center, and the second case has to deal with pure residential area.
But would it be a problem, Jimmy and Bill, to hear them together?
And then you got a separate,
It just seems like they're asking for two different things on two pieces of property. You know, yes, they have some similarities. Allstate Financial is the same thing. They're in a general area. That's, you know, okay. But they are asking for two different things. They're asking, as Jimmy said, commercial on one part and a planned business campus, and the other is purely residential. I think it is different enough that we ought to hear them separately. I'm not saying I'm going to vote for or against
Mr. Chair.
either way, but it just seems like that'd be the best
Mr.
way to hear
Chair.
it.
I owe Mr. Fontenot an apology because I asked him to see if these cases could be combined for discussion. We would appreciate going forward with them separately.
I would
Okay.
like to be able to see the whole picture.
Okay.
And, I mean, and if they are together and similar, even though we're voting two separate things.
All right.
Do you want me to make that in the form of a motion?
Yeah, we need a motion.
Do we need a motion?
Do we-
I'll make a motion to hear them together.
We have a motion and a second to hear zoning case 14-03-024, which is item 5, and item 6, zoning case 14-03-025, together. And 025 is existing zonings A3 suburban district, A4 single-family residential, and HC3 highway commercial district. The proposed zoning is A4A single-family residential. It's 80.37 acres. Petitioner, again, is Allstate Financial Company and others, and the owner is Allstate Financial Company and others. Parcel located on the north of Pinnacle Parkway, south of Flowers Estate subdivision, Ward 1, District 1. We have a motion and a second to hear items 5 and 6 on the agenda together. Please vote. Motion carries 6-3 to hear them together. Staff?
Mr. Chairman, we'll start with the staff report on the first, the commercial portion of the property. This is a proposal for just over 48 acres to be rezoned to Planned Business Campus, or Planned Business Center 1 and Highway Commercial 3 zoning districts. The proposal is to establish the PBC 1 and HC3 zoning necessary for a mixed-use center to include a publicly owned facility that may include meeting spaces, a cultural arts facility, children's museum, and other public amenities. The property is also proposed to have private commercial operations, including a hotel and restaurant. The alternative zoning classification that would allow this mixture of uses would be the HC3 designations on the entire piece of property. This proposal will reduce the number of possible permitted uses on the vast majority of the property from the dozens of permitted uses in the HC3 to 7 permitted uses outlined in the PBC1. The reclassification is the next step in the process of programming the project for the public facility and developing the infrastructure required to support the proposal to bring this important asset to St. Tammany Parish. On the residential portion of the property, this is a 80-acre plus or minus parcel of land in which there's a request to change the zoning from a mixture of zonings to an A4A single-family residential district. The site is located north of Pinnacle Parkway, south of Flowers Estates, and is immediately north of the previously discussed commercial portion of the proposal. The 2025 land use plan calls for the area to be developed as a planned district with single-family residences, including conservation, and we have no objection to the request as it meets the 2025 plan. The zoning change to A4A, which would allow up to 6 units per acre, will allow for a transition, provide balance between the abutting residential subdivision and the commercial Pinnacle, the Colonial Pinnacle development. And in both cases, the staff recommends approval of the request as requested.
Thank you, Mr. Fontenot. Anyone in the audience wish to speak on this? Mr. Shane?
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Again, Jeff Shane of the Jones Fussell Law Firm in Covington, and I represent the owner, developer, and petitioner of these properties. The staff report, I think, gives you a good feel for why we believe these zoning changes are in order. In no necessary order, I will discuss first the residential tract, which is approximately 80 acres. It's the northern portion of the property. I think all of you are familiar with where this property is, but it's on the west side of the Tchefuncte, north side of I-12. It's along Pinnacle Parkway. And the 80-acre area, the northernmost portion of the property, abuts Flower Estates. And we have had very constructive and good meetings with both the Flower Estates Board and also the Association of Associations, presenting our thoughts and development plans with them. I believe some of their representatives are here this evening and will speak for themselves, but I'm happy to say that they have agreed that our residential plan is a good plan and one that they not only have no objection to, but support. A couple of things with regard to the residential development. It would be 146 lots. That's a density of about 1.7 units per acre. There's around 25 of the 80 acres that's nearest the river that is lowlands or wetlands that will not be disturbed, will not be permitted, will not be part of the development in any way. So for those that have concern about what we might be doing along the river as it relates to, I've heard talk of marinas and bulkheads and a variety of development, literally no development plan as it relates to any area. All of the wetlands will be preserved, and in fact, it is our hope to put a conservancy servitude over those wetlands area where they abut the river. The A4A lots will be typical, probably 60 by 120, 130, something like that. They have a boulevarded access way coming off of Pinnacle Parkway. So a very important component as it relates to Flower Estates and the Association of Associations is that years ago when there was a settlement of litigation concerning the possibility of a Walmart going in that general area, there was the creation of a 100-foot no-cut buffer abutting the Flower Estates boundary. That 100-foot no-cut buffer will in fact continue to be maintained. No derogation from that prior deal, not that we could unilaterally change it anyway, but we want to reaffirm that that is certainly our intent. Any of the other provisions in the settlement agreement certainly will continue to be honored. And most importantly, there will be no connection of the residential or commercial development into Flower Estates. That question has come up in more occasion than one in our meetings over the last 30 or 45 days. So again, I said that I would stipulate or make it clear on the record, even though the plan doesn't show a connection, not only is there a 100-foot no-cut buffer that we couldn't pierce anyway, but aside from that, again, no connection to Flower Estates. So we think that this will be a good residential buffer, if you will, between the commercial to the south and the existing residential Flower Estates to the north. And we think that this will provide a good community or opportunity. It will be similar in many ways to Normandy Oaks, which is again another development of this same developer that's on the west side of Highway 21. In many respects with regard to the type of homes and things of that nature. Going now to the PBC1 and HC3 site. If you would, look at the vicinity maps with me, please, because I want to make sure that you understand the 2.5 acres to be zoned HC3. Hopefully you can see that on the north side of Pinnacle Parkway in the kind of the southwest corner. That is likely to be a restaurant site. It certainly could support other forms of commerce, but we picked that site. You'll see that it is a long way from the river. It's in the southwest corner by design. There is, I might add, for those of you, and I don't know how many of you travel this area often, but there's probably as good an infrastructure at this site as any place, perhaps along the I-12 corridor, not just in this parish, but in general. So we believe that the restaurant site is well situated. The rest of the property we seek to have PBC1, and I think the staff made some strong and good comments that really this property does not need to be zoned HC3 because there are many uses in HC3 that aren't necessarily bad uses, but quite frankly, they are much more intense than what you would find in PBC1. We as the developer are more than satisfied to have what I consider to be a more restricted zone with the PBC, and we think that this will allow us to do all of the things that we hope to do. Now let's talk about what I think is the most exciting part of the project, as it relates to things that the people of St. Tammany Parish will have an opportunity to enjoy. And that is, the PBC area will have properties within it that the developer will donate to the parish to facilitate the eventual location of the Children's Museum, also an adjoining amphitheater, and also a theater for performing arts. These are all properties that will be owned by the parish, and the parish will certainly be incentivized to determine in what ways it can finance or perhaps create business partners to allow for the construction of what I call these public amenities. One thing that I failed to mention earlier, and that is that within the PB site, there will also be an area that will be kept owned by the developer for commercial development. And his hope would be that he would be able to develop a very nice hotel property to complement the Theater for Performing Arts, the Children's Museum, the amphitheater, a beautiful nature trail, if you will, that will probably be elevated through the wetlands. We look at this as being an opportunity to establish a cultural identity in St. Tammany Parish that we probably don't have at this time. We have a lot of fine cultural amenities in the parish, but if we are able to synergize and get all of these facilities at one location with this wonderful infrastructure, this could really be something that will not only be enjoyed by the people of St. Tammany Parish, but it's probably going to be bringing people to our area from all over to visit these things. It's going to provide multiple use opportunities for the schools, public, private, parochial. It's going to provide incredible educational opportunities, perhaps in the film industry. There's lots of ideas, and these ideas are being studied right now by a consulting firm that will eventually make a recommendation as it relates to the size of the structures, their precise location, and things of that nature. And we're hoping to have the results of that study in the months to come. At this time, I guess, as it relates to what I call the commercial case, some of the things of emphasis that I ask you to take into consideration is that there will be a donation of the property to the parish for the facilities that I mentioned, the Children's Museum, the amphitheater, and the Theater for Performing Arts. Also, there are considerable wetlands within this tract along the river. And those areas likewise will be burdened or encumbered with a conservancy servitude so that the floodplain will not be disturbed. You will not have a buildup of the land. You're not going to have bulkhead along the river. We know that there are many residents here this evening from the city of Covington that have understandable concerns about the impacts to their property as it relates to use, sight, sound, but perhaps more importantly than anything in their eyes, drainage. And we understand that they do not want us to create a project that allows water to back up, to hold, to go into areas in their neighborhood, into their homes that they have not experienced in the past. You know that there are regulations that prohibit that, but we have told the residents this evening in some of our conversations prior to the hearing that we look forward to meeting with them in other meetings in the future. In fact, Mayor Cooper reached out to Mr. Weiner on Monday of this week and has requested a meeting with the constituents, his constituents, the Old Landing residents, later this month, which we'll be glad to do. Some of the frustration from our perspective is that the drainage questions are excellent questions, but they're not questions that we can answer at the zoning level. The hydrology studies have not been done. It doesn't mean they're not important and won't be done, and that good answers don't need to be delivered, but as you as a commission understand, and I hope the public understands, there are processes that you go through. And the first step in the process is to see if your commission believes it is a wise recommendation to the council to make the zoning changes that would effectuate this business plan. A business plan that we think is not only good for the private sector, but perhaps equally, if not more so important, good for the public sector as well, for the people of St. Tammany Parish. Those are all the comments I have at this time. Sounds like my time's up, so I'll have a seat.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. Anyone else in the public wish to speak for this? The time is actually expired, but with the commission's concurrence, we will allow a brief comment by those that still wish to speak?
Thank you, Chairman Doherty. Sandra Slifer. I'm president of the Association of Associations, and that I did have the opportunity to speak with Mr. Wayner on the phone for probably an hour about this project, that two of his representatives, Mr. Shane and Mr. Burris, did attend the AOA meeting that we had in February. They presented the plan. It was a very well-attended meeting. We had an opportunity to ask as many questions as people wanted to ask, and after they left the meeting, we had an opportunity for open discussion, and that the consensus was that we are in support of these zoning changes with the provisions and some of the explanations that Mr. Shane has already detailed. So we're in support. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to close the floor on the for. Does anyone wish to speak against? Okay. Yes, sir. Please state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Randy Roban. I live at 2301 South America Street, Covington. It's the old landing area of Covington, which is across the river, directly across the river from this entire proposed change. What we've got in this situation, which I don't think that a lot of people are paying attention to, is you've got I-12, which is a natural levee. It creates a dam effect, and three rivers have to all come together at that point in time and go underneath I-12. And we're not, when we're thinking about, okay, we're going to be putting in X number of homes and a commercial development and everything else, we still have to get those three rivers and all of that drainage underneath. I don't think that we should be voting on or moving forward any type of zoning changes until they do studies that determine how they're going to take all of that water and move all of that water underneath I-12. We're sitting in a situation where we live in an area where we've noticed since the development went in across the river, the shopping center went in across the river, higher levels of water than we've seen, in the past 20, 30 years. We haven't done any studies. We've just noticed that the water has been higher than we've seen it before. And before we get to that point in time, and I realize I've been educated a little bit, you're trying to change the zoning here, not do the entire development. But if you change the zoning and it allows them to start moving forward, and they want to go into the areas where they're going to be filling in the land. And, some of the area might be 16 feet above sea level, and some of it might be 4 feet above sea level. At the end, it's all going to be the level of the commercial development. And when that happens, we're going to be dealing with a wall where the water's going to hit, and it's going to try to go through the area underneath I-12. And if it can't get through there, it's going to back up to the lowest areas across from it. And for that reason, I think before anybody should even vote on it, whether it's yes or no, I think a study should have to be done, whether it's done by the parish or it's done by the developer or the person that's in favor right now of the zoning change. So, on that, that's the way we see it right now. We feel like it's going to affect where we live. Certainly, depending on the height of the buildings and everything else, the scenic part of the river is going to change. There's no doubt about that. But first and foremost, it's the drainage issue and the possible flooding of the old landing area of Covington. Thank you.
Let me make a comment on
Sure.
on the drainage issue, and Mr. Shane alluded to it. The drainage will be a 25% reduction post-development from what it is today. Okay? They have to retain 25% of the water and not let it go just running down to the river. Okay? So it's actually going to be an improvement in most cases. Now, engineers do make mistakes, I'll give you that. But by the same token, when they put their seal of approval on that drainage plan, they are liable to have the right drainage in place.
I'm glad you asked the question because maybe I'm not making myself clear. It's not the water that's going to be draining off of the development that's going to be retained before it goes into the river. It's all of the water that's coming from the Abita, the Tchefuncte, the Bogaflaya. It's all of that water that is going to be coming down and all the natural drainage that has to pass through that little teeny area at I-12.
Okay,
So
but
that's the
that has
problem.
nothing to do with this particular case at all.
Well, it
Okay?
does.
No, it does not.
well,
Okay,
yes, it-
We cannot make any decisions on drainage that is not within this development. Okay?
Okay, if the development is going to cause the area to be raised, you know, you're going to go in commercial. I don't think that they're going to go into that area without building that land up. And when they build that land up, it's going to take away the natural floodplain of the river. Now, look, if they didn't put I-12 in, we wouldn't be talking about this right now because it'd be a whole different story.
Well, I-12 was.
I-12's there. I-12's there. And when I-12's sitting there right now, we're dealing with that spot where the river has to go through. And if the parish, look, I'm in favor of a cultural development center and everything else. There's probably a spot to put it. But if they put it here, and do you think that the parish is going to want to build it on the levels of the land that they are right now? No, that's not going to be the case. The parish is going to want to raise it.
I just wanted you to understand that the retention factor on this property, on this development, is going to be better than a natural runoff is today.
Okay, it's going to be
Now,
better.
The Three Rivers and all that coming in there, that has nothing to do with this particular project.
Well, it does have something to do with it, because when they go in and develop the property, and they raise the level of the property, when they raise the level of the property, that's going to create a wall where the water can't go anymore. So you've got a floodplain. You know, this is like.
I understand what you're saying.
I know, we're dealing with a bathtub here with somebody bringing in a fire hose. And if the water can't go down, it's going to come over the sides. And where it's going to go, we can't take our houses right now and raise our houses. We can't go back in there and say, okay, you know, my house is never flooded. But if the water can't get through, because they're raising the level here, not the runoff, but they're raising the actual property level, which you're going to have to do if you're going to develop this commercially, then the water is going to have to go somewhere. And where it's going to go is the lowest level possible.
Okay.
And so that's when I'm, you know, if I'm being clear on, you know, it's not that retained part, it's the other portion.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Cazabon?
Yes, I have a question of staff or Sydney.
Let me see if there's anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak against this. Okay, and then when we close it, then you can ask your question to staff.
Okay.
All right?
I do want to say that the people that are here from Old Landing, I'm very familiar with it, and they have had higher water, some have flooded, more so than they had in the past. And I know what their concerns are because I've seen where it joins. And it's not the elevation. I understand what he's saying. It's not where we take the runoff has to be 25% reduction, the rate of reduction, but where is that water going to go once it's reduced? My question, and this might answer some of y'all's too, is I'd like to ask Sydney about the model. Do we still have our drainage model that, or at what point would we put this information in to see, like we did with the Chinchuba, where that water's going to go because of these different rivers that meet, and like you said, the interstate has a play in it where it hasn't before. Are we able to put that into our drainage models to give us that information, and at what point can we get it?
I would have to check with the Department of Engineering on the status of the model. I know they were working, the Tchefuncte is a very large basin, and last time I talked to them about it, which has been quite a while, they were working on the Tchefuncte basin. I think the key point is how much fill are they going to bring in, and is it at a location where the water is now coming in and being held, the floodplain as it is today? If they are bringing in and leveling and filling areas that are not part of the floodplain but part of the property, it will have no impact on the backup. If they're coming in and filling in parts of the floodplain, I agree with you. down in that Cypress Bottom, which is not in the plans to fill that portion, that's part of the conservation easement, then that potentially could reduce the amount of area for the water to stay, to be held as it goes through underneath I-12. But the work is to take place on the uplands on the eastern end of the property, not under the pine, essentially the pine portion of the property, as opposed to the cypress portion of the property, which is right along the river, and is a dramatic drop-off. There's a dramatic bluff on that property.
Right, I'm aware of that, but it will have an effect. It will have an effect.
Excuse me, point of order. While these concerns, I believe, are very valid concerns, and I think they really need to be addressed, we're in the zoning mode right now.
Right.
None of these concerns are part of the zoning question. Whether they get rezoned or not, they can't do any development or make any changes until it goes through the planning section. And that's where this is addressed. While I sympathize with your question, and I believe you've got excellent questions that really need to be addressed, this isn't the proper venue, and I think we should move on from this.
Okay, thank you.
But my question was, could we get the information from the parish in time for us to make the learned decisions that we need to make, is all that I'm asking on the staff's end, so.
I think we're in the same situation that we often are on traffic impact.
Okay.
Where in order to do the engineering.
understand that.
You need to know the baseline. In order to get the baseline, without engineering, you can't put anything in the model. In order to get the baseline, you have to know what zoning is. It's that something has to come first, and that's when we talked about the programming of the public portion of the property, something has to come first. The first step in that is the zoning is allowable, therefore we can move forward in what's the design of the building going to be, what size, what location. Same thing happens on traffic impact, same thing happens on drainage. You need to know what the baselines are in order to develop the engineering to put in the models and do the studies to make sure that the negative impact, if there is some, can be mitigated. If the negative impact exceeds a certain level, the project doesn't happen.
Correct.
Well, there's a lot of difference between sitting in traffic and having water in your house. And so, and the one other comment I'm gonna make back, and however y'all run, the zoning and how you run the planning and everything else, whether or not it should be the opposite way, which it really should be. That you should know what the impact's gonna be before you start changing things, in my opinion. I wanna make one more comment back to what you were saying, that the area that's going to be developed is not the area that's in the floodplain. But if the area that's developed is raised higher, and going back to that one more time, than the area that's across the river from it, then that water's gonna hit there, not be able to go into that area any longer, and it's gonna come back over to the other side. So, that's just really what needs to be considered. And this is like maybe one of the most instrumental spots in the entire parish, shoving all that water through the river right there. And we really need to be thinking, because all of the developments everywhere are having an impact on that water draining through there right now. And every time we decide, okay, we're going to move forward, we're going to have another development, we're going to make this commercial, we're going to change this zoning, it's making impacts on the areas that have been there for a long time.
I'm going to stop you because you're way over time.
Okay.
And,
Well, I was just standing
there may be
listening.
somebody else that has a brief comment.
Okay.
Other than you, that is against it.
Right, all right, well, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak against this project? Going to have to be brief because the gentleman already used up time on that.
My name is Byron Barrios. I'm at 70 Cypress Road in Old Landing. If you've seen the map there, down closer toward I-12, I'm directly across from the proposed hotel marina, which isn't supposed to be necessarily a marina, but more of just a bulkhead dock. Our major concerns are just the site of commercial buildings across our what's it?
There's no marina.
There's not a marina.
You might have the wrong case.
No, there's supposed to be some sort of dock for boats or something. No. No, okay.
No, that's
Well,
what
the hotel.
Mr. Shane said earlier, there's no marina. The river's going to be just like it is today.
Well, that's
shoreline.
the only opinion that I wanted to voice, was just that some sort of buffer between a hotel and such, whatever. I mean, I understand art center, amphitheater, all that stuff, but a hotel across the street across the river from a residential area is what I oppose to, and parking lots. And there will be some sort of bulkhead boat slip area. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak against? All right, I'm going to close the floor to initial comments and go to rebuttal. Mr. Shane. 5 minutes.
Well, I don't want to be argumentative with the last gentleman, but I think all of you heard what I said, and if I need to say it again, I will. There is no development planned along the river. In addition to that, all of the lowland wetlands area, which Mr. Weiner and I believe could be as much as 70 acres, we hope to impose a conservancy servitude across that property. It does a couple of things. It creates distance, which means concerns about sight and sound really should be unfounded as it relates to the properties across the river. The other thing it does is it assures, as it relates to Mr. Roban's comments, the impact of water that he seems to be concerned about is if, in fact, the lower areas are filled so that they can no longer take the waters that they currently hold. And I understand that, and I don't disagree with his, or certainly respect his concern. But 2 points. Number one, I said no development in the lower wetlands area, maybe as much as 70 acres. I don't believe that will be an issue. But number two, and most importantly, I don't think it's fair to ask the developer at the time of zoning, when we're trying to determine if you and the council believe these are appropriate land uses, the money that would have to be spent to do the hydrology plan and the other things that are required in order to develop this property, that's putting the cart before the horse. The horse is for you to decide tonight how you're going to, what recommendation you're going to make to the commission. And I don't believe it's a slight on my part to say that I think the residents have to be patient and work with us. That'll be partly my job to communicate with them so that as we develop the drainage details, we can share that information with them and hopefully appease their fears. And I don't say that to get a vote tonight. I mean, it's the way the process works. And I'm not so much preaching to the choir as I am to make sure the public understands. I understand the sensitivity of the drainage issue. I do think it's important, because I'm not sure that everyone here understands, that by nature of development, it's very important that the amount of water coming off this site is going to come off at a reduced rate. And that's extremely important. That will affect the river. That will affect the properties on the river, both above and beyond. Because right now, if the water is coming out at X rate, it's only going to come out at 75% of X after it's developed. That is a positive for everyone. And that's something we should be able to demonstrate once we do our hydrology study and move forward with the project. The other thing I would tell you is that our elevations in that area range as high as 16 feet.
Actually, 19 or 20 as it abuts Flowers Estates.
19 or 20 at its highest point. Certainly there's areas where it's much lower. But my point is the thought that just because this property is going to be zoned means that there's lots of dirt that has to be brought in to support the pads for these structures, that's simply just not the case. It's yet to be determined. But most, if not all, of the land where we hope to build these structures, it's good high land already. And again, if we preserve the lowland area and put a servitude on it that prohibits fill dirt from being placed in that area, when we're not bulkheading the river and there is no marina, I can't tell you that there may not ever be an area to dock if perhaps people want to come to this area and get off of a boat to go onto the walking trail or go to the amphitheater. But this is not going to be a commercial or public marina. It's simply not. It's not in the plan. We have no plan to go get a permit to do any bulkheading. I don't know how simpler I can state that. And I say those things because, again, I understand the concerns of Old Landing. With all due respect to Old Landing, and I can say this as a native of the area, Old Landing has its own set of problems that were here long before any of these properties were developed. And that's not casting a stone at Old Landing. It's just a low area. It's along the river. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's as nice a residential area as we probably have. All the more reason why the people of Old Landing should be sensitive and why they should demand good answers once we produce the drainage plan for this project. We ask that you recommend that the council change the zoning so that we will be encouraged, incentivized to go forward with detailed drainage plans that we not only share with you but also with the people of Covington, so that we can have a development that's not only compatible from a use standpoint, but also is one that will be respectful to other people's property in the area.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shane. The opposition, you have 5 minutes to rebut if you wish to speak.
The area of the commercial development sits on a 10-foot contour. It doesn't sit 16 and 20 feet. It might have areas that are 16 or 20 feet, but it sits on the topographical map on the 10-foot contour. So to say that you can change the zoning to commercial when nothing can be developed on 10-foot contours unless it's filled in would be foolish. The second thing that we didn't address earlier is that, there is a noise problem that's occurred since the shopping center was developed. Now, when you walk out on your front porch, you hear the interstate. And when they knock down the rest of the trees and develop the rest of the property, then we're going to be like we're living on the interstate. We're sorry that, Old Landing has its problems. We know it's a low area. But the area where I live right now and where a lot of people live does not flood. We are having the problems with having to hear the interstate. And we are opposed to having the zoning change so that we can be one step further into the process of having a development go in. I think, again, the cart should go before the horse in this instance, and you should have to come up with a plan to deal with the issues that are at hand. And it's really funny, that Jeff just said that, we're not going to have a marina, but we're not to say at one point in time we might not have a spot for boats to start docking. It certainly sounds like a marina to me. So anyway, that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak against? None rebuttal.
Across from the, or I should say to the east of where the hotel would be, is a concern of ours as well, where I just, who's to say that if that's all commercial, that they couldn't just turn into restaurants or what? I don't know what a PBC is. I don't know. I know it's 7 things he said. I don't know exactly what they are, but what's to say that can't start popping up restaurants, bars, whatever it might be? That's
Okay,
it.
thank you. All right, I'm going to close the floor to the public, bring it back to the commission. I don't know whose light was on first. I'll start with Pug.
Okay, Jeff, could I ask you a couple questions, please? Have you got a copy of this document?
Yes, sir.
First of all, let me say I live in this area, and for the most part, I want to compliment Bruce and also the people from Sterling. I think in combination, the development on both the north side and the south side complement each other, and it's turned out to be a great commercial development. It's producing a lot of revenue for the parish, and it's great for the most part. But there have been some areas where the plans didn't work out exactly as they started out to be. At one time on the north side, it was going to be, what was the term? A living area, what was? Lifestyle area, okay. And that plan didn't quite work out that way. And there was going to be the department stores on the western end that didn't quite get finished, and they're still sitting there vacant, not completed. There was a movie theater approved that never got built. And I'm not saying that in a negative sense. I'm saying that plans don't always work out the way you think they're gonna work out. If you look at the plot that we're talking about, the one on the north side, we're talking about the conservancy would apply to both pieces of property, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that would be along the river.
Yes, sir.
And my concern, my only concern that I have right now, realizing that we're gonna come back and talk about drainage later, is what happens if something doesn't work out? If this gets approved, it's approved. And I've heard we've planned to do a conservancy. It's the intent to do a conservancy. My point is, if we approve it and it doesn't work out, it's approved. Okay? And then all of a sudden, the conservancy might not come about. If I'd like to see a little bit more solid feel for that conservancy along there.
May I comment to that?
If you would, please.
Yes,
That's
sir.
what I'm asking for.
Well, I think we have to remember the property is zoned now. And there's nothing to stop this developer from developing it as it's currently zoned and seeking to get permits to bulkhead the river and fill it in. I don't say that in a threatening manner, but I think you have to look at what the current conditions are. So I would suggest to you that if you look at the zoning case before you, you're looking at a combination of existing residential and commercial zone. You are being asked to grant, in my view, a more restrictive commercial zone, the PBC. I watched you do a PBC at 1088 and I-12 either last month or the month before that quite frankly has good infrastructure but can't touch this infrastructure. And so my answer to you would be that when I say it's our intent, we need to see how the property is ultimately zoned. But this developer will stand by its word that it intends to donate the areas that I said earlier to the parish for the creation of the Children's Museum, the amphitheater, and the Theater for Performing Arts. And that also we will place a conservancy servitude on the lowland areas along the river. Right now, there is no commitment to do those things as it's currently zoned. And we would be free to develop that property, in fact, perhaps even including a marina. And we're not doing a marina. Maybe I make a mistake when I talk about the possibility of boats docking, but I tell you that if you look at the plan and recognize that we have what I will call a nature walk through the wetlands area that goes to the river, I guess it's not inconceivable that you may have people that will try to tie a boat there to get up and walk in. I consider a marina a place where boats are housed on either a regular or semi-regular basis. But I mean, the point is you have boat slips. It's usually commercial. We're not having any of that. So perhaps shame on me for mentioning, but it was my way of trying to, quite frankly, be transparent as to how I see the plan likely to develop. But to answer your question, there's no hesitation with regard to the creation of the conservancy servitude over the lowland areas.
That's all I need. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Willie.
Hey, Jeff, while you're up there, you mentioned, the conservatory area, and you mentioned 70 acres. What's the distance from the river? How far does that extend in feet?
Sure. I'm going to look to the Wainers, but I would tell you that about 25 acres is in the northeast corner, the area that we hope to develop A4A, and that's got to run 300 feet. Excuse me?
Okay, so it's
Maybe-
at an average of about 1,000 feet from the river?
Now, we're talking about the northeast corner of this track.
Okay.
It's not going to be 1,000 feet uniform.
Right, I
I didn't
understand
realize,
that.
quite frankly, it was that great, but let's say it's 500 feet at a minimum in terms of the area that's wet. And that continues. It's multi-hundred feet.
I know it's not going to be a straight line, but it's
No,
going
but
to
it's going to be all the
meander around
all the
close to
wetlands areas,
500 feet or more.
which is a significant area. I would say that there's probably no point that's less than a couple of hundred feet.
Okay,
At a
that's
minimum, and in
what I
many
was
cases, I think it'll be much more than a couple of hundred feet.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm misspeaking. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Matthews.
Jeff, I just got a few questions, kind of clean up. I don't remember, you might have said it, but how does the A4A get access?
The A4A will have a boulevard, median boulevard, coming due north off of Pinnacle Parkway, pretty much right into the center of the property.
Is that the
You might see the stub now,
It's
if
the
you've driven
Eastern
out there.
Boulevard.
It's east of Academy, and
Right.
it's probably stubbed up 2/3 of the way, or? Excuse me, it's stubbed up all the way to the property
So
line.
that's
So
the
that is,
access.
that is the point of access, and it's in our
Okay.
view, a terrific
won't
access.
come
Yeah.
through Flowers Estates or anything like that?
No, sir.
Donation to the Conservancy and the donation for the public use, when will that take place?
Probably sometime after the zoning is put in place. We'll again stipulate when at the council, if the council sees fit to make the zoning change, it will be understood that these properties will be donated. I think the donation probably will not occur till the study has been completed and we know the precise size and location of the public elements. That's one of the things the study's doing. It's not so much that Mr. Weiner is opposed to giving too much. What we don't want to do, quite frankly, is make the donation and perhaps find out that there might have been a better configuration amongst these elements. Try to get some efficiency, thinking that maybe the parking areas for one facility certainly can also accommodate the parking needs of another facility. So to answer your question, I think it will be after the zoning's done. But certainly, as we go through the planning process, whatever that might be, I certainly think in this calendar year, we should have the planning of this site hopefully in tow, and we'll be in a position to make the donation to the parish and also place the conservancy servitude on the wetlands areas.
And certainly before the final approval and planning.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the final subdivision approval, I would think one of two things. It would either be done at that time, or we would expect your approval to be contingent upon those transfers and encumbrances taking place.
And to kind of satisfy some of the questions we had, there will be absolutely no development, not a shovel turned, before the appropriate studies, the hydrology studies or traffic studies or whatever occur. That's part of our rules and regulations in the parish. So that
Yeah.
won't happen.
Yes, sir, that's correct. We, as you know, the law would not allow us to even pull a building permit, but irrespective of that, we make a commitment to you that until the proper studies have been done, submitted, and approved, absolutely no development, no go forward. And it's going to be a considerable amount of time before we're ready to do that.
And I realize, of course, it's not Mr. Weiner's problem, but hopefully we'll have a better performing arts project than Jefferson Parish has had.
Let me say that we hope to have the finest performing arts center in St. Tammany Parish.
And probably finished before Jefferson's. Thank you.
Mr. Davis.
Yes. As is, let's talk about zoning. As is, you could probably build about 100 homes on this site, as is, on A3. That's how it is. In a flood zone A, you can probably put about 2 foot of fill for each one of those homes, and of course, 2 foot of fill for the driveways going into these homes. I say it's a better match to put a planned business campus here instead of having those 100 homes there. So I make a recommendation to approve as is.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Motion by Mr. Davis, seconded by Mr. Matthews. Ms. Casbon?
Which case?
This is.
First case.
First case.
Okay. Ms. Casbon, you had your light
No,
on?
just, I was going to make a motion. I concur.
Okay. All right, we're voting on zoning case 14-03-024, which is the A3 and HC3 going to a PBC1 and HC3. Please vote. Motion carries. And now we need to vote on zoning case 14-03-025, which is the A3 and A4 and HC3 going to an A4A designation.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Matthews, seconded by Mr. Willie. Please vote. I'm sorry, Mr. Davis?
I have one question about this. The current A4 zoning you're requesting for A4A, I don't have a problem with that going from 4 units to 6. The A3 zoning which allows 2 units per acre, you're asking us to go to 6 units per acre. Well, it's A4A, you're also asking for A4A in A3, right?
Correct, yes,
So
sir.
that would go from 2 units per acre to 6, which is a 200% increase in density. But you're saying that most of this area cannot be developed. Is that correct?
That's correct. Our development plan is for 146 units on 80 acres.
On those entire 80 acres?
On the 80 acres that we are asking you to recommend A4A on.
And the
that's a
majority
densi-
is gonna be
that's
in the A4
that is
section.
That is a density of 1.7, which is less than the 2.0
Right,
that A3 would allow.
okay, so you're.
It's a decrease in density.
Right. But just looking at this site and looking at where the floodplain is, obviously, you're gonna probably build more of these homes in the A4 section as is now than the A3 because of the limitations. Okay.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve zoning case 14-03-025. Please vote. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, item 7 on the agenda, zoning case 14-03-026. Existing zoning's A4A, single-family residential. The proposed zoning is NC1 Professional Office District. It's 1.32 acres. Petitioner is Fred Bass. The owner is Robert Charbonnet. Parcel located on the northwest corner of 9th Street and Falconer Drive, Ward 3, District 2. Staff?
Considering the location of the site and the designation of the 2025 future land use plan to be developed with a mix of commercial uses, staff has no objection to the request and would like to recommend approval.
Thank you. Mr. Bass in the audience. You have any comments for us?
Well, I want to say good evening to the commission, and I'd like to say thank you for hearing our case tonight, and we certainly hope that you see this and make it possible. I'm Fred Bass. I am president of St. Tammany Parish Farm Bureau. We've been in operation since back in the 60s. We take care of a lot of people in the area. We have about 3,200 members. That's all over the parish. And so I'm here to answer any questions that you may ask.
Thank you. Ms. Casabon?
Yes, this is for a professional office building, which they need, the Farm Bureau, which would be a great location, access to all. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion by Ms. Casabon to approve, seconded by Mr. Willie. Mr. Matthews?
Object.
All right. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Bass.
Thank you so much.
Have a good evening, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Item 8, we postponed that one on page 3. Plan review, PR 14-03-001. The use is a drive-through ATM bank. The corridor is Highway 21 Plan Corridor. The zoning is HC2 Highway Commercial District. Use size is 80 square feet. Petitioner's Ray Marquez. Owner is Metairie Bank. Parcel located on the southeast corner of Louisiana 21 and Xenia Drive, Ward 1, District 1. Staff?
The petitioner is proposing a drive-through ATM bank on a parcel located on the southeast corner of Highway 21 and Xenia Drive. The sign package, site plan, and landscape plan have been submitted for review. Staff recommends approval of this proposal, subject to all regulations as written, conditions as written.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience wish to speak on this? I'll close the floor to the public, bring it back to the commission. Ms. Casabon?
Yes, I think we need this. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Casabon to approve, seconded by Mr. Randolph. Mr. Matthews?
I actually have a couple of very minor but cleanup type questions, but I guess there's nobody here to. Oh, okay. Well, when we asked if there was anybody to speak, nobody came up. My first, and I guess really it's my personal concern, is that the plats that were provided, I can't read any of it. In the future, it'd be nice to have something we could read. Second thing is, and more to the point, this is really just going to be an ATM. It's not going to be a bank at all. It's not going to be anybody on site or anything like that. It's just an ATM machine.
Drive-up ATM with a canopy.
Okay, that's what I needed to make sure of. Thank you.
You welcome.
Mr. Randolph. Okay. All right, any further discussion? Please vote.
Can I ask you one question real quick, just for clarification? Petitioner agree to all the staff recommendations?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Just want to get that for the record.
Yes.
All right, please vote if you haven't. Motion carries. Thank you. Any old business? Any new business?
Move, we adjourn. That's right.
Did I hear somebody say adjourn? Thank y'all for coming.